So, did you recognize some of the wasps when you started looking through it that you've seen in the field?
I did.
Yeah.
I recognized quite a few of them, but there was some that I was like, I needed I was like, it's good that I'm seeing some clarification here, because I figured like I knew what a bald-faced hornet was, but then there's a couple in here that look just like it, and I'm like, crap, I put that on Instagram saying I knew what this was, and then I'm not sure, but I have to go back and count the T1 to T3 if that's missing or if it's
Yeah.
there. But yeah, so it's one of those things where the more you learn, then the more you realize what you don't know. And
Yeah.
um,
It's well, at least I think we're all the same, right? We're kind of lifelong learners. We
right,
don't, there's no hard stop.
no, and it makes it more exciting to learn more. I actually read your whole book. I'll just kind of introduce it now. This is Wasps by Heather Holm. Heather's joining us for our book club today. Thank you, Heather.
Great to
And
be here.
yeah, it wasn't, I mean, every single species, like you mentioned in the beginning of the book, how interesting their life stages are, and the characteristics of how they find food and stock their nests. Everything was so interesting and stuff I didn't really necessarily knew before, that I just kept reading and reading and reading, and then I made it to the end of the book. So yeah, it was a really interesting book packed with a ton of just like super awesome pictures that I don't know how you can get them to stand so still for you, because when I tried taking these pictures in the field, all I get is a tiny blur in the picture. So
Yeah, it's a whole different kind of patience, that's
oh
for sure.
gosh, yeah,
Yeah.
I bet.
I've seen some of your pictures though in the blog post. They're great.
Yeah, it's like 1 out of 1,000 pictures. I'm like, okay, that wouldn't work out. And Sarah takes really great pictures for the Instagram too. Like, it's really fun to see in your book the stuff we see on almost a daily basis when we're out in the field. And we try to plant a lot of these native plants that you mentioned in your book. And it was really interesting to see what other ones we might add to that list. But a lot of people, you kind of talk about in the beginning of your book, have the misconception that these wasps are dangerous and scary, and some of them look pretty intimidating, like the great black wasp, which is my personal favorite because it does look kind of cool. And but
Yeah.
we don't have any problems at all with them when we're out in the field, because they're mostly foraging. We might run into a ground nest here and there, weed whipping, and that's not as fun. But for the most,
No.
yeah, and those are mostly yellow jackets, or I mean,
Yeah, the ground nesting yellow jackets. But I'm glad you brought that up, Tracy, because many people are gardening and kind of interested in all of these different insects that visit flowers, but you can literally work within your garden and not be at risk,
not
unless,
it's fun at all.
in rare instances, something gets caught in your clothing but yeah, I would agree the great black wasp is kind of kind of intimidating and flicks its wings a lot and looks like it's going to do something scary, but that's not the case.
No, they seem very docile, really. You can get really close to them. I take a lot of pictures of them because they actually let me get really close. But
Yeah.
the golden banded, I think I'm saying that wrong, but the great gold wasp.
Oh, the great golden digger wasp. Yeah.
Digger wasp. Yeah, that one is so shy and will not let me near it. And I get so mad because it's a beautiful wasp, and I try to get close, and it sees me coming and instantly like goes away. So it's not just that they're not dangerous, they're kind of like shy and afraid of you too. So
yeah, I find they almost give you like the look out of the side of their head and like, no, not so much. I'm taking off.
right. So like come on. But yeah, no, I really learned so much from your book. I didn't know about the orientation flights that these wasps do to find to go back and find their nesting sites. And I saw a video you had, I think the other day, where it shows them flying around to orientate themselves.
Yeah.
And that's just super cool.
Yeah, you'll see some ground nesting bees doing that as well. So that's
Okay.
kind of the fun things that I tried to highlight in the book, is all of those similarities between native bees and wasps, because they're so closely related. But yeah, if you find a nesting site in the ground and time it right, you can watch a female leave and then do that orientation flight. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. I need to now get your other books out. We have all your other books, but I see a lot of these like little green cuckoo wasps and assume that they're little sweat bees.
Yeah.
And so now I'm trying to, and it's really helpful though to read the book and see that these have the 3 segments if it's a female and 4 segments on the abdominal area.
Yep. Yep.
So,
The one species has 4, but yeah, they're kind of look more hunched, the cuckoo wasps. But you know, at first glance, it's like, oh, that's just one of those emerald green sweat bees.
yeah, that's what I think. But so now that I can, when I think a lot of people picture wasps as like the paper wasps, but they range so much in size, and I really like that you've included those really, really tiny ones that are just, you know, millimeters.
Yeah.
They're really not going to hurt you. They're really interesting parts of our ecosystems and the way they interact with native plants. And I thought that was super interesting and cool.
Yeah. The book barely kind of scratches the surface in wasp diversity, but for the ones that you're going to primarily see visiting flowers, that's what I focused on. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Right.
cool.
Tracy, you should hold the book up and show how big it really is. When we first got it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is just so much bigger than I thought it would be. It's so thick. There's so much information just jam-packed into it. So yeah,
I got a lot of
all the cool facts that are in there, and it's
a
just
textbook.
like mind-blowing.
I got a lot of feedback exactly that, Sarah, that people are like, oh my goodness, it's a beast. When it had arrived at their house, they weren't expecting a big hardcover book. But I like the larger format pictures. I think that may help people see things a little bit better.
Definitely.
And know what to look for or photograph while they're out in the field.
Yeah, for sure. That's very helpful. And I liked how you included excerpts from old not old people, but the old books of, I guess you would call them naturalists books, old manuals and journals from, like, there was one I think I saw from 1895 and 1905, and it's almost, they were a little bit more poetic than I think today's scientific journals. So it's nice to see kind of that added to it as well, just knowing that these insects have been around and people have been studying them or watching them and observing them and finding them interesting like we are. So that was really cool.
Yeah, I started to find some just scouring, you know, really old natural history papers for just any kind of tidbits or facts about a particular species. And then I thought, oh, this is exactly what you said, Tracy, kind of that flowery, almost Victorian prose, you know, that it just really helps convey the enthusiasm that people had for them and appreciation, which, you know, my writing's pretty scientific and dry. So I thought that would bring in some different sort of character. And
yeah, no, it's a nice duality because you have the, you know, very helpful descriptions of like the first through fourth abdominal segments have apical bands and stuff like that, which is very helpful. But then later on, you read a little bit about how they're in the garden and they're just watching like the bees and wasps fly around, and I'm like, that's really kind of something that adds a little different touch to it, which I thought was really cool. And it's kind of cool to notice that those observations are still kind of helpful today, I think,
They
for
are.
studying the life of these wasps. So that was really cool. And you mentioned that too, the helpfulness of the citizen science aspect of these observations. And I'm on iNaturalist a lot. Sarah is, Natural Shore has an account, and it's really fun to use that to make observations, and then you can kind of feel like you're being part of a study and stuff. I actually was really excited. I found a spider that hadn't been seen in Pine County before when I was up at my grandparents' cabin. So it just feels like you're in it and you're helping. And
Yep.
you said in your book you use that a little bit too to figure out some of the ranges of these wasps.
Yeah, some of the, like a lot of Hymenoptera bees, a lot of those natural history sort of research, the funding kind of dried up in the 60s and 70s, right? So, and so did really the attention to some of those species. So iNaturalist frequently has, expansion of ranges just from citizen scientists' observations. And that, I think those maps that I have in the book will have to be continuously updated as more people use platforms like iNaturalist and, get expert verified observations. It's really changing what we know about certain species ranges. And then, climate change may be playing a little bit part of that too, right?
Yeah, I was wondering if if you can look back at observations 40, 50 years ago and see if these ranges have been expanding and not just, like we hear about a lot of these bees and wasps getting endangered and going extinct, but maybe their ranges can move too, and with climate change. And I think that's really interesting that we have a platform where we can add our observations, and then the experts like you can study that and see different characteristics that might not have been there before. So that's cool you added that in your book. I really liked that you mentioned that several times too.
Yeah, I really am a big fan of iNaturalist. I think it's a great platform, and like I think you two, our interest just doesn't lie in one living thing. So it's a place that you can observe plants, animals, insects, birds, everything that and it's just a great way for people, even beginners, to upload a photo. They have no idea what they just photographed,
right,
but they quickly learn, or at least it gets pared down to something maybe genus level, and then they come away learning something.
Yeah, I think that definitely snowballs then too, where once the first couple observations, you kind of figure out the app, and then it just snowballs where you question everything. Well, I thought this was this, and now I know it's something else. But then you keep learning and trying new things with the app and making more and more observations, and it's definitely fun. And I like that we have this book now where I see things in the field, and maybe iNaturalist doesn't give me like a perfect answer like you said, but I can come back to this book and maybe reference the families or subfamilies and just try to figure out where in the ballpark I might be, and then go from there. So I think that's really cool.
So one question I have for you, Heather, each species is so detailed. There's like just so much unique information about each species of wasp in the book. I'm wondering, what is there left to learn about wasps? What kind of research is being done to learn more?
Yeah, there's many researchers are studying the social wasps because just from an evolutionary standpoint, I think there's a number of questions that could be funded and for particular research, but a lot of these more, I'd say, obscure solitary species that there aren't that many people, to my knowledge, studying wasps. There's some excellent wasp taxonomists, but we need a whole new generation of people, I think, that take an interest in wasps. And as I mentioned, you know, some of those species descriptions took forever to put together, just because there's so little information on some of those species. So there's definitely real opportunity for new research. Hopefully people get excited about funding that kind of research, right?
Yeah, this book
because
will spark that.
exactly. I mean, I tried to convey that wasps are important. They, you know, they are doing two really significant ecosystem services: pest population control and incidental pollination. So why wouldn't we, you know, want to put more emphasis on studying their basic life histories? Would be a good starting point.
Yeah, no, I didn't realize that they had such a diverse, you know, prey, you know, that they went after. I thought most of them went after cicadas or crickets and stuff like that. So it was really interesting to hear in your book all the different pest species that they do manage. One of them being actually the emerald ash borer, correct? Is that?
Yeah.
And that's really, I mean, it depends on the species of wasp, and some go after other grubs in the grass, stink bugs you mentioned, I think, a few times. And was the Japanese beetle one of them, I think?
That's, there's a couple of, there's the scollid wasps and the thinnid wasps that are, the females dig down into the ground and lay their eggs on scarab beetle larvae. And
Yeah.
Japanese beetles are in that family of beetles. But as to my knowledge, and I really looked hard and wide for this, we don't have any confirmation that they're actually preying on Japanese beetles, but it's probable or likely, but we need confirmation on that, because they prey on native scarab beetle species. And
right, yeah.
But yeah, similar life history and so on.
Cool. Yeah, I was a little sad to read the chapter about the spiders, because I actually really like all the spiders we see, the yellow garden spiders in our restorations. But it was very interesting to read that one of the wasps, you know, would actually fly purposefully into the spider web and not get stuck, and that was trying to coax the spider to come out and kind of, because it was thrashing the web, pretending like prey, and then would go after the spider. It's amazing it doesn't get caught in the web. And
I know.
So interesting. And I did not realize that they actually massage the abdomen of the spider to wrap it up in its own silk. Yeah. And I mean, when it's little details like that that are so interesting, I really hope, yeah, people will read this book and get super excited about wasps, you know, read that they have those beneficial parts of their life that affect us in a good way, and do some more observations and find them going. Can you make a couple of suggestions? Like, we see a lot of these wasps foraging, but it'd be really cool to actually see them. I think only a couple times I've seen one like carrying a little cricket across the ground. How far do they always, I'm sorry, I've got so many questions in my head, but how far do they usually have to bring that prey back to their nest? Like,
yeah, that's a great question. So it depends on the size of the prey and whether the female wasp can actually like clutch it underneath her and fly with it, or it's just way too, you know, much larger than her, and she has to, like you said, drag it across the ground. So ideally they would be hunting, if they're what we call draggers, not that that's a term, but they would want to hunt pretty close to their nest site so that they didn't have to expend all that energy, right? Dragging a big katydid or cricket back to the nest. there's a couple of wasps that they decide to dig the nest burrow in the ground after they capture the prey. So that kind of makes sense if you're hunting prey much bigger than yourself, right?
Yeah,
So they hunt a grasshopper, they drag it a short distance, then find a nice little bare spot, dig a quick burrow and shove it in there and lay their egg on it.
yeah,
But then the wasps that hunt like small caterpillars or, you know, flower flies, they can carry it underneath them and fly back to the nest. So that's where you're getting maybe what we'd call larger foraging ranges, right, for prey. So it's that prey carrying mechanism that would really determine, yeah,
it's
their
just amazing to
capabilities.
me that they can find this prey too, especially when you're talking about scarab larva that's in the ground. Like
Yeah.
how do they can't see underground, so how do they find it? But I think you mentioned there's like sensory organisms that they use, and do they use smell? Do they try to, I can't.
Yep, smell. So they've got sensors on their antenna for smelling volatile compounds. They also probably use vibrational, just feel, you know. So the ones that dig down to scarab beetle larvae, the females perch on the ground and they kind of walk around. They'll wave their antenna, which is probably smelling, you know, trying to pick up odors. But it's likely that they're also sensing any movement below ground too.
Yeah,
But yeah, that's
impressive.
yeah. But who knows? These are just hypotheses, right? Who knows how they find the scarab beetle below ground?
Yeah, or very specific types of caterpillars. I mean, you mentioned in your book there, I mean, we should talk about the, you know, how it's laid out for each species, and you talk about appearance, nest biology, and prey, and some other information, but you mentioned like specific prey for each thing. So not only do they find their prey, but it's usually a specific thing that they're looking for, which in the whole, you know, ecosystem that we're, even if it's a small area, is very impressive to find you know, that specific prey and then use that. And then they have to also compete or worry about the cuckoo or parasitic wasps that are after them too, and
Right.
laying the eggs. And I didn't mention, like, they have that, they sting their prey, which paralyzes it, which is terrifying to me, that their prey is like alive for an extended period of time and knows what's going on, you know, presumably, and is
Can't move. Yeah.
it can't move and is being dragged or flown across the landscape and put into a hole. So I mean, it's just very interesting, almost like sci-fi stuff, but it's real. And
It is. Yeah. It's like I kind of think of it as like nature's refrigerator, right? Keeping that prey fresh and alive long enough for the larva to eat it.
Right.
And you can interpret that as really gruesome or really fascinating.
Yeah, maybe they don't feel it because they're paralyzed, but yeah, it's, and some of them are stocked with, like, I think up at one I wrote down was like up to 30 or so caterpillars in a little cell for the larva, and that's super impressive that they have to find that many to stock their
Right.
nests. So they're busy.
Yeah, and then like bees, you know, the ones that nest above ground are looking for additional nest materials, you know, mud, either to make walls between their cavities or make free-form mud nests. So that's a lot of work, right?
Yeah.
you gotta do all that work, plus find 30 caterpillars, then find some food for yourself while you're doing all of that. So
Yeah,
but
I thought it was interesting that they make their own mud. I didn't realize they collected the materials separately, the water and the dirt
Yep.
or soil, whatever substance they're using. So that's, it seems like even more work, but
Oh yeah, a ton more work. But I guess if they're driven to do that, right? For some reason. They want to probably avoid larval cannibalism, sisters and brothers eating themselves if they're all in one cell.
Right.
So you've got to divide up the siblings, right?
Yeah.
No sibling fighting.
You always want to separate those. Yeah. For my own personal experience, it's better to have separate rooms. For sure.
Exactly.
Um,
But you touched on a good point, Tracy, about the prey, because I think that was one of the most interesting things I knew about, but researching the book, it was like, oh wow, so many of these wasps are truly specialists of
right.
a very specific kind of prey. Like even as you mentioned, the caterpillar, ones that hunt caterpillars, well, they may only hunt caterpillars from one family. So that's a lot of work, just
How do
trying
they-
to find,
Mhm.
your specific prey out in the landscape.
Right.
Right.
And then they have little things they do with that prey too. Like I was really interested to read about the Eastern ant queen kidnapper, which also everything has really cool names, which is really fun. Eastern ant queen kidnapper wasp, who they only look for ant queens, which is seems like a pretty big specialty. But then once they get them back to the nest, they like separate the queen from her wings and like put the wings in a separate place. And I like, what do they do with the wings? Why are they taking their wings? And
I don't, the females remove the wings before they put it in the cell. I would imagine that if they were actually, there's a rationale, the wings are probably inedible, right? So maybe they rip them off so that they're only providing nice juicy parts for the larvae to eat. But that they are very specific of only searching for winged queened ants with wings. Like they won't hunt ones without wings.
right.
So
It's
wrap your head around that one, right?
So maybe they like can smell the pheromones that denote that ant being a queen, but something changes when the ants lose their wings, or it makes me want you to write another book about something. And but and the bee wolves too were super interesting. I think I've seen those quite a bit when we're out in the field, because they're obviously after the bees too that we see. And I thought it was really cool that they actually take the pollen off the bees that they capture. Do they eat that pollen or do they use it?
I don't, not that I know of. I think there were 1 or 2 studies that discussed the female beetle wasp removing the pollen before they put the bee in a cell for the larva. So pollen, not many wasps are pollen consumers. So I would imagine they would want to just remove it so the larva didn't try and consume the pollen.
Right. It's just,
But
very.
who knows? Who knows? Just another interesting behavior that I couldn't leave out of the book. Right?
Yeah. Did you observe that yourself? I just think that would be so cool to watch.
I've photographed and observed a number of beetle wasps bringing back bees to their nest, and but they're all loaded with pollen, and they go in the nest with the bee with the pollen, so that that removal of pollen must happen within the nest somewhere. Kind of like maybe they have a little cell that they, like the winged the ants, they put the wings in one area out of the way.
It's like their garbage part of the nest. That's funny.
Yeah.
So at my grandparents' cabin, I often see, I think they're paper wasps, but now that I have this book, I'm going to bring that up there and make sure. But I see a lot of wasps on lily pads, and I can never figure out what they're doing on there. And I'm wondering if it has something to do with all the other bugs on the lily pads. Like you mentioned, they also eat honeydew. I don't know if you've ever observed that, but I see a lot of different kinds of wasps too. I think some of them are hornet, like those bald-faced hornets that come in I don't think they're getting water, but I can't really figure out what they're doing. And so I made a note.
Yeah.
Heather.
Well, you just described all social wasps. So my first guess would be, yeah, they're collecting water because they need
Okay.
water, to combine with the wood fiber to make
Oh.
paper.
Mhm.
So they need a source of water. They also will put water droplets inside of the nest on hot days and then fan their wings. So it's kind of a air conditioning like
Yeah.
effect. So that's two reasons why they would be seeking out water. And I can see how a lily pad would be the perfect place, right? They wouldn't sink, they could perch on it, a very shallow amount of water sitting on top of the lily pad.
Yeah, it's really cool to watch them. And yeah, it's another example of them just doing their thing and not bothering anybody. And, we'll be doing our thing. And it's just nice to have those little observations that of nature going on around you. So, but yeah, that makes sense. We have a lot of paper wasp nests around the cabin, and I'm very reluctant to have my family go after them. I'm like, no, they're fine. Like, we just won't use that door. Like, we'll use the other door. But
right, yeah, that's a good strategy, especially if you identify where a nest is and it can be, you can create an 8-foot buffer around it. Generally, paper wasps are the least aggressive, so. But I would imagine up north with all the bigger supply of caterpillars that it would be, ideal habitat for them. They'd find plenty of food sources.
No, it's fun to watch them. You kind of go canoeing and they're in the lily pads, they're on the flowers, and it's really fun to see them all. But yeah. Do you have a favorite wasp in your book, Heather?
Oh boy. Not really. I guess I do like the beetle, the bee wolves. I think they're interesting. They're a little bit easier to identify. And I also really like the sand wasps. There's a couple of species that nest in really loose sand. So if you know of sites that, have that bare loose sand, you're likely going to find them there. And they've got a lot of fun antics, males patrolling the ground and really excited digging techniques. So they're just kind of hilarious to watch.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, all of them are beautiful and interesting and have really cool behaviors. So, I mean, in each kind of family you cover in this book, there's really information about each one. We're running out of time here on Zoom, but I just wanted to say we really loved the book, and thank you so much for writing it and sending it to us. I'm gonna have to pick your brain about photography, and we'll definitely be sending you maybe a couple texts this summer of things we saw and be like, is this page, the same thing on page 114, and get some clarification there. But
That's good. Well, thanks for having me. It's fun joining the Natural Shore Book Club.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. And yeah, keep writing, keep making more books. We've really enjoyed all of them, and we'll keep featuring them on our little book club here because they're so much fun to read. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Yep. Bye, Heather.
Bye.